Michael the Teen here once again for a new episode of It's Cup of Time. And today I'm going to answer questions. I posted on Facebook if anybody had some questions, put them in the comments, and I do an episode on questions. This is for a couple reasons. One is I didn't have an idea of anything to do for this week. I have been so busy and just trying to come up with an idea. I had nothing, so I thought I'd ask for ideas. And the other thing is I want this to be as much your channel as mine in some ways. I want to do things that are of interest to everybody out there who's watching, So I opened it up to questions. I printed them out here. I've got some questions, and I will do my best to answer them, and we will see what happens with that. I've got my tea. And just so you know, I really do drink a lot of tea. It's my favorite beverage of choice. Okay, let's get to the questions. Tasha Crandall wrote, how to get money to buy more gongs without prostituting myself? There's no easy answer to that, but the big answer is you just set a goal and save up for it. I mean, that's what I did. I know everybody looks at all my stuff, and I got bazillion gongs and bells and bowls, and you should see the other part of my studio is full of drums and that. I was like, wow, how did you get all that? Well, I've been collecting instruments for over 50 years. So none of this just happened in a week or a month or a year. It's a gradual process where I keep adding things to my collection. And I still do. And I bought new gear this week that I had saved up for. So one thing you can do, you can earmark a certain percentage of whatever money comes in your door. 2%, 5%, 10%, whatever. Put that in a savings. Bang. And it adds up. And, have a goal. I want to get this gong. It's $1,200. You just start saving for it. That's what I do. I still do. That's what I've done my whole career, is try to plan out what I'm buying. And then if somehow extra money falls in my lap and I have a lot of money, then it's great. And I can buy other stuff too. But I always try to have a plan. So either save up for it by just, taking a part of my income that's coming through the door. I do sell a lot of gear that I don't use because over the years I've accumulated all kinds of stuff, some things for one-off projects or for when I was playing in a certain band doing certain stuff, and it's like, well, it's just sitting here. I don't use it. I'd rather sell it, take the money, and buy something I'm going to use. So selling gear, get a part-time job, do something, on the side, even one day a week. I mean, if you made $50 once a week, that'd be like, $300 in 3 months or so, or $600, whatever. I mean, there's no easy way. You just save up for what you want. Now, another part of this, too, is watch for used gear. I'm never afraid to buy used gear, especially if I could, see it in person and inspect it and know that it's good. It's not all beat or whatever, but a lot of stuff I buy is used. I always search eBay, Reverb, Craigslist, any sort of local sort of internet sales. I go to flea markets and rummage sales, good places for bells. You want to find bells, especially here, I live, in Milwaukee. So if you think of the Midwest area and all the farmers, and all the farms had bells. If you want to find handbells and sleigh bells and strings of bells and all that, flea markets are great places for that. Antique shows, antique shops. You can often find a lot of bells. Once in a while you get lucky and somebody who was a world traveler might have some Asian bells or even a bowl or something. But for the most part, it's American type bells, but you can find a lot of bells that you might be able to use in your setup. So things like that. I'm always looking in those odd places like that. Secondhand stores, Goodwill, other secondhand places. Oftentimes you can find interesting things that are not instruments, like cast iron pot lids and things like that you can buy for 50 cents at a secondhand store or Goodwill type store, and they resonate and they sound as great as some sort of a bell or cymbal that you would spend $100 on, and you can get it for 50 cents or $3 or whatever. So look in unusual places like that. But yeah, there's no easy answer. It's just set a goal. Say, I want to buy this gong, write it down, how much it costs, and then, save up money and keep subtracting, from the cost. Okay, I only need to get $800 now. I only need to get $300. So $400, $50 left to get, and then watch for sales too, because once in a while you'll find stuff on sale on some of the internet stores, and they'll discount certain gongs or bells or that. But that's all you can do. That's what I do. That's what I've done since I was 12 years old and started playing drums. I had a paper route, delivered newspapers, and saved up $132 to get my first snare drum kit. A Ludwig acrylite snare drum with the stand and the practice pad, a pair of sticks, and a nice case. And I remember saving up for that. And that's what I've been doing ever since. All right, my good friend Donald Boucher, who I met at Gong Camp this year, has a couple of questions. First, right off the back, I still can't figure out to a certain point why people constantly evaluate gongs with their iPhone tuner. Like, oh, it's a B1 exactly, what I need in my set, or else, what's the relationship? As there's practically hundreds of overtones in each and every gong, and some of those will create the harmony between your instruments. Yeah, I understand you. I've got my iPhone sitting right over there. I have 3 tuners on it, and I use them all the time for specific reasons. And I've gone through my whole collection and, gotten the tunings down. I have a kind of like a spreadsheet chart on my computer with all the tunings of my instruments, but that's not up in my head. And when I play and do stuff, I'm never thinking about the tunings because, as I've explained in previous videos, I don't work with tunings. I work with sound. Completely different thing. But yeah, I mean, you could take your tuner and you can get the fundamental pitch of your gong. Let's say it is a B1, and there are a lot of overtones. And you can have multiple gongs with the same fundamental pitch, but they will have different overtones because they're shaped different. The metal's different. And, no 2 gongs are identical. And you can figure out, I need an F, an A, and a C gong, and you can buy those, and they might not work together because the overtones are clashing. So it's about much more than just the root note of your gong. That's a place you can start, but you really have to listen to it. So that's why I base all my instruments and all the music I create on my ears. I know I've got 2 planet gongs up here, and they are tuned to notes, but I didn't buy them because of the tunings or because they were the planets. I bought them because I really liked the sound, and I liked how these 2 worked together, and more importantly, I liked how they worked with all the other instruments in my collection. So I bought them purely on sound, and they could have different signs on them. They could have other alchemical signs. Consequently, those are the signs for Jupiter and Venus, but also for tin and copper. So that was kind of an inside joke there. It's like, oh, okay, tin and copper are what? Bronze. These are nickel silver gongs, but tin and copper are bronze, and those are the alchemical symbols for tin and copper. This kind of So everything I do is steeped in multiple meanings. So there we have some multiple meanings there. Yeah, what else can I say? I think you should do everything by ear, but a lot of people work with specific tunings, as I have said before in videos and all over Facebook and other things. People work with planet tunings, chakra tunings, other tunings. My good friend Mike Tambiro works with just intonation, which is a different type of tuning than our 12-note scale, the way we normally tune things. Find what works for you and go with it, okay? And if it works for you, just do it. I don't care what you're doing. Do it, and do it the best you can. But I think people are kind of hung up on, running around with their tuners sometimes. Oh, what's the note on this gong, and what's the note on that gong, and at Gong Camp I did that. At Gong Camp just a month ago, I had my tuner out and I was listening to various gongs. Wanted to know what the fundamental note was, more just from an aspect of where this gong lies in the grand scheme of things, from low to high. Is it a B2? Is it a B1? What are the overtones? And I wanted to know what some of the overtones were. So I will do that, but ultimately, to me, it's like, do I like the sound of this instrument, and is it going to work with all these others? Okay, enough on that sort of thing. His second question is, let's do an episode on different approaches to the entry point in a sound meditation. Let's do an episode on how we would carry a 1-hour session or longer with minimum instruments, 1 gong or 2 bells or bowls. Okay. I'll work on that. Maybe we'll have something like that next week. I did do something about the entry point. If you go back on this whole 12 episode series that I just did, that's sort of a master class, starting with I can't even remember, it's so long now, talking about time and talking about sound qualities and things like that, qualities of time and whatever. But I did talk about that, I believe. But yeah, we can give that another go. Here's another question. This is from Ken Little. What is your process, or what have some processes been, when you were putting together sounds and compositions for an album? We could talk for hours on this subject, because it really varies depending on what I'm doing. As far as composing and putting together an album, there's 2 very distinct ways I work. One is live. I'm thinking of I'm recording music and it's going to be played live, and that's it. No overdubbing. It's going to be just like playing live out in front of people. And I compose music with that in mind. In like my first album, Stars Show the Way, my second album, Labyrinth, my recent album, Pure Land, those were all recorded live. The first 2 were recorded in multiple tracks and mixed down, but the idea was we just had mainly 2 live mics and then some spot mics. Pure Land was recorded with 2 stereo mics, and that was it. I wanted to capture the sound of the room here and the sound of just me playing. And Pure Land is the bulk of what I'm playing out in my sessions right now. So it was designed to be a live thing. And most of my albums are recorded that way, live to 2-track, or if I have extra tracks, it's more spot mics, or I might have a close pair of mics and a far pair of mics to pick up the room differently, and then I can listen and use either or mix them together to get a whole sound. Now the other way I work with is more my percussion ensemble music, albums like The Sea We Swim In, Transparent Universe, and I think there's a couple others. And with those, it's music I am composing, but it's not designed to ever be played live. It's percussion ensemble music, and it's never going to get played live, even though it's written down. And in those cases, I work in various ways. So, so I put together sounds. Let's first go back to the live stuff. I just put up a set of sounds. I'm hearing sounds, and I'm thinking, I want to use these instruments. I want this gong, and I'm hearing this bell, and hearing this drum or something. And I'll put it up, and I'll just start working with it and come up with a rhythm or a melody or some sort of a mood, and then work with that, and then go from there and build things up. And pretty soon I have some sort of a composition, I guess you might say, even if it's loosely based just on an idea, and then record that. Back to my percussion-based music, like The Sea We Swim In. That was recorded 2 years ago. That was my pandemic album. It was sort of like something I always wanted to do. I've been into gamelan music since the late 1970s, when I discovered this cool-looking album on the Nonsuch label at my local record store. I was like, oh, this looks kind of interesting. So I bought it, took it home, put on my headphones, and had my mind completely blown because I'd never heard anything like this. And I've been listening to gamelan since then, and I probably have 40, 50 gamelan albums in my collection. And it's just like, it really intrigues me. So I'd always wanted to record an album of gamelan music, my own gamelan type music, but kind of, filtered through me, through my Western ideas, because I'm not Asian. I don't play gamelan. I don't even have a whole gamelan, but I wanted to use those same sort of ideas. And I put together this album. And the genesis of most of the album was a small set of my tuned gongs. I have a little over 2 octaves of tuned gongs, the Dream Mbao gongs, which are really nice. I like those because they're very bell-like, as opposed to the Thai gongs, which are a little more boingy steel drum sort of sound, at least in the small ones. Well, I came up with this setup, and I took, I believe it was 9 gongs in a Japanese scale. I worked with a couple different Japanese scales because I really love Asian music. And had the root note in the center with the bigger gong, and then had 8 gongs in a circle around it. And within that, I used a couple of my other ideas. I work a lot with geometry in my music, whether it's this sort of composed percussion ensemble music or solo music. I'm a very visual person. I see geometric shapes when I play music, and that's how I remember music. Playing drum set or playing the gongs or that, that's how I could remember my parts, is thinking in shapes. It's like, okay, this on the chorus I play these shapes. On the verse I play these shapes. And to me these shapes are movement patterns and how I move around, a drum set or a gong set and that. So much of the music that I create is based on geometric patterns that I see in my head. And the music triggers these patterns, so it might be sort of a synesthesia to some extent. So I created the setup. I had the gongs, and I was playing various patterns of 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, 7 notes, because also I like to work with numbers. I really like prime numbers. I tend to work with prime numbers a lot. So geometry and prime numbers mainly. So what I was doing for The Sea We Swim In, I'd have these gongs here, And one hand would be playing maybe a triangle shape, 3 notes, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and it could move around and play 3 notes in a different, on different gongs. And the other hand, the left hand, might be playing 2 notes, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 also, but a different pattern, on different gongs. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I could shift around and have a different melody. Or perhaps this hand would be playing 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So now I've got interlocking patterns that will meet up, 3s and 4s. So that's how most of that album was composed. It was composed from the gongs. And then from there, I orchestrated it out and played the vibes, xylophone, marimba, the gongs, tune gongs, and then on top of that, I added the very large gongs as timekeepers and, denoting sections just as in actual gamelan music. And I added hand drums because I love hand drums. So I played a lot of hand drums on the album. So if you give a listen to it, especially the title track, The Sea We Swim In, that was the first composition I wrote for the album. I'll put a link down below. Just go listen to it. I'm extremely proud of that track because it was an idea I had in my head. I could see the whole thing in my head, and it was the idea of trying to transmit this through the instruments, through the computer, and then mix it and put it together and have it come out, pretty much like it was in my head. And it did. And I'm super critical of my own music, but I love that piece. And I remember the first time I took it and went and got in my van and drove around the neighborhood, and I listened to it, and I was just like, it just blew my mind because it was like, yeah, this is the way I like it. And that one has 5s and 7s and all kinds of different interlocking. The different instruments are moving around in different times and different shapes and interlocking, and it's pretty cool. So give that one a listen, and then listen to the whole album. There's a lot of similar things, but that's one way I work with. And the thing about that album too, it was recorded in sections. When I do the live stuff, it's like, okay, turn on the recorder and go and play. And I usually, unless there's a mistake, there's no splices or there's no, I don't believe in all that kind of stuff. If I make a mistake, I start over and do it again. I want one complete take. When I'm working in the ensemble music, it's very different. And my wife's a quilter, and to me, it's a lot like her quilting. She takes fabric, she cuts it up into pieces, she sews the pieces together to form bigger pieces, and then sews those together to form a whole quilt. Well, I do the same thing in that I record like 8 bars or 16 bars, and I'll record a different 8 or 16 or 4 bars or whatever. And then I have all these pieces on my computer, and I start putting them together. Just like taking pieces of a quilt and sewing them together. I start sewing these pieces together to make a complete song. So nothing on, I don't think any of the tracks on The Sea We Swim In, I played any part completely all the way through from beginning to end. Maybe a couple of the drum parts because they went on last, so I was just layering them. But most of that was done in short sections and then put together because it was really intense. If you go to Transparent Universe, another percussion ensemble one I had, a lot of that was all done in one pass. I would just record a track, and then I would layer another track on top and layer another track, and I just kept going like that. So that was recorded in a slightly different way. It was just all layers. Where The Sea We Swim In was patchwork, Transparent Universe was layers. 1 or 2 track layers. So those are the main ways I kind of, put together sounds and compositions for an album. But it always starts out with three things. I either have a rhythm. Yeah, some sort of a rhythm. And I'll work with the rhythm. And then start figuring things to put on top of that, to go with it. Or it starts with a melody. Boom, 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 boom. I've got like my tune gongs here. Let me grab a mallet. I just get a melody going. Like. Okay, I'll come up with a melody. And the other way is I'll just have some sort of a mood. And I'm feeling these feelings. And it's like, how can I capture these feelings? What instruments, what sounds, how can I capture them? And then I work from there. So there's no one way that I work. It's not like I sit down and start this. And even sometimes I'll just sit down with paper and start writing music out. Start writing notes. I have done that. Or on the computer, I go into Finale and I'll just start putting notes because I can hear all this in my head. All I got to do is type it down. I might work that way. So it varies from album to album. I think the main thing is what's the goal of the album and what type of album is it going to be? Is it going to be solo percussion? And I want to just record 2 tracks live. Is it going to be ensemble percussion? And I'm going to layer or patchwork things together to create this whole multi-ensemble of sounds. Okay, that's kind of a long-winded answer. Let's move on here. From Sonia Tamika, who I believe is in Sydney, Australia, if I recall. How to build your own gong stand, alternatives with clothing racks, do-it-yourselfs. How to organize Gibraltar gong stand extension with steel tubing and clamps. No Gibraltar parts available in Oz until March 2023. So got to think out of the box. Well, there's no Gibraltar parts anywhere. I mean, they're just starting to come in, apparently. And it's hard to find a lot of the popular clamps that are used in gong setups. So let me give you a few ideas, things that I do. One is look for used drum set racks. Okay? I find those all the time at my local store, which specializes in used gear. It's called Music Around. It's a chain of stores here in the States, and they really deal a lot in used gear. People just go there and sell the stuff they not using. I need a few bucks, so cleaning out the attic. I got all these instruments. Like get rid of them. I go there and I'm always looking for used drum set racks. There's a lot of drum set racks out in the world, and they can be repurposed to become gong racks. Recently, and I don't know if I think I was in a video probably 4 months ago or something that I did. If I find a video, I'll link it down below. Recently, I lucked into 2 very large 3-sided drum set racks for very cheap. I got one for, I think it was $100 and one for $150. So I got a lot of tubing. I got a lot of legs and feet. I got a lot of clamps. And, if you think of drum set rack, it's all one layer. But if you get some extension clamps, which you might have to order, and I happen to have a bunch of them in boxes here. I had some extra ones, and I put them on there, and suddenly, you take one side, and you put it on top of the front, and boom, there you go. You got a double gong stand. So I've got, right here in my studio, I've got those 2 stands I built. I built 2 double gong stands that can hold up to probably about a 30-inch gong on each of them. And I built them out of these 2 drum set racks that I bought, and a few extra parts that I had here in my collection. So that's the first thing I would do. Look for used drum set racks. And not just Gibraltar. Tama makes drum set racks. DW Pacific does. I think there's a couple other drum companies out there that make racks, and they all use the same 1.5-inch diameter, outer diameter tubing. So all their fittings and all their tubing, it's all exchangeable. So I do have some Tama clamps and Tama tubes. I've got some tubes from electronic drum racks. So that's a good place to look for. Go to music stores. If you're in Sydney, there's probably some big drum stores. I don't know. There used to be Billy Hyde's drums. Is that it down in Sydney? Look, again on things like Craigslist or your local sales things on the internet, and music stores, and look for drum set racks, because you can always get parts and tubes and repurpose them or use them to build up. If you got a rack like this and you want to add sides, you can get parts from a drum set rack, and suddenly you got sides that you can add on. So that's one thing I do. That's a big thing I'm always doing, is haunting music stores for used racks. And a lot of times you can get them so cheap. I like those ones I just bought for like $250. To go out and buy all that stuff new, I probably would have cost $800. Honestly, the stuff is like, the prices are kind of crazy on that stuff. So used parts, I'm always looking for used stuff. eBay, sometimes you can still get good deals if you find stuff close to you. Otherwise, shipping on racks can be kind of horrendous. But clamps and parts, you can often buy lots. Somebody will be selling like 4 clamps or a box of clamps or something on eBay or Reverb or other sort of similar things wherever you live around the globe. Look for that, used clamps and parts. As far as tubing, do I have that here? Let me go grab a tube here. There we go. I got so much parts here. It's kind of crazy. Okay, here's something you can use. This is the 1.5-inch outer diameter aluminum tubing from my old patio umbrella that broke in a windstorm last year. And you can kind of see, here's the little button up here where you put the top part with the actual umbrella on it. All I got to do is take a pipe cutter and cut this little part off here, and boom, I have a nice tube here. Recycled parts, you can find them. I mean, this is a standard 1.5-inch diameter, outer diameter tubing is a standard tubing in the industry, used for many things. So this is from a patio umbrella. So I've got this. I also have the top part, and I can use this on a stand. You can often go to some sort of a hardware store and buy 1.5-inch outer diameter aluminum tubing, or maybe if you're lucky, steel tubing, or if you have a metal company around you that sells like sheet metal and plate metal and metal tubing, they might be able to provide it. If you're really lucky and you have a little extra money, you can buy carbon fiber tubing. They use it in the auto industry, making race cars. They use it for a lot of different things, but you can get 1.5-inch outer diameter carbon fiber tubing, which is very light and extremely strong. That's something you can look for if you have some sort of a carbon fiber dealer close to you or whatever. You might be able to get some. It costs a little more, but it weighs so much less, so there's a good balance here. I've seriously thought of taking my whole road setup and spending like $1,000 or whatever to just get carbon fiber tubing, because it would weigh half of what it weighs. And I'm not getting any younger, so that would be great. But that's another, alternative. I'll show you a couple things. I'll grab my iPhone in a minute and we'll look at my setup, and I'll show you some of the clamps and some of the other alternatives that I have done over time that you can use. You can use different diameter tubings too. You're not stuck to 1.5" diameter tubings. You can use the standard Tom and cymbal iron clamp and use smaller diameter tubing to run extensions, or you could run like a crossbar, like I have in the back here above me. You could run smaller diameter tubing there and hang your gongs, which I did when I was first putting together this whole gong setup. I was using smaller tubes because I had already had them from a previous rack I had made. Here we are. Questions about expanding your rack. Here's some various ways that I'm doing it. One is using these type of stackable clamps. This is the main frame of my rack here, and then I have a wing coming off that way. I'm going to pull back on that. So there's the corner, you can see. And then down here I have a regular T-clamp with a bar, and going to a corresponding T-clamp over here and another one up there. So that's one way of how I expand it. Now on this particular stand here, as you can see, I have the main part of this middle stand, and then I come over and I have a whole other support leg on this end. But on the one I use live, I don't have this support leg here. I just have the bar coming off the main stand. And that's sufficient. I put a 28-inch gong up there, and I don't feel I need to have this other leg here to hold it. So if we back up, I got too much stuff in here. You can kind of see. I'm using my iPhone here. So if we back up, you can kind of see there's the corner of my stand, and I've got that stackable clamps there and then T-clamps below. And I've got the legs happening on both ends, but the live stand doesn't feature that. So that's one way to expand your setup. Let's look at a couple other ways, different clamps. Here we have a double clamp designed to fit 1.5" tubing. So we can put this on here, and I'll just use a short piece of tubing to demonstrate, and then we can put another tube in here, tighten it down. We could have whatever length we want to put on there to add on to our rack. The thing you'll notice though, it's either in front of, or if you flip it the other way, it will be behind the rack, as opposed to the regular T-clamp that I use, like you can see over here on this rack, where they're on the same level. So this will put it in front. But you can often find these clamps with, like I said, a drum set rack that you get. They're perfectly usable. Sometimes I like to use them because they get the gong out. Use them at a top bar so it gets the gong out a little further than the rack itself. So that's one way. You can use a different clamp to extend it. Let's look at another type. Here is, gotta get this apart. Here's a standard clamp for adding a tom-tom arm or a cymbal arm. It's got the 1.5-inch clamp here, and then this is an adjustable one, which goes out to, I don't know if you can quite get it 1.5 inches. Usually doesn't go out that far. Let's put it up here. And what I have here is like, this is about 1 inch diameter aluminum bar that I've put some hooks on. So you can put something like that on there and then hang a gong. A little gong here. If you want to hang, you know, like small gongs. So there we go. I've got something like that. So if you get creative, you can use different clamps in different ways. So I like this if I'm just going to hang some small things, some bells or small gongs. I've got various aluminum tube I got at the hardware store. Got some hooks and drilled some holes in here and put the hooks in there. Bang, homemade stuff. So you can do things like that to expand your setup. And like I said, a lot of these clamps, if you buy a drum set rack, you'll get these types of clamps. You'll get this. This is, again, this will hold a tom arm or a cymbal arm. So just a standard rack might often have 4 of these clamps, 2 for cymbals and 2 for the tom-toms that are mounted over the bass drum. You can use, you know, smaller diameter tubing. You could get steel tubing from the hardware store, plumbing tubing, whatever. Use it with these clamps to add wings to your main setup. Oftentimes the racks will have this for the crossbar instead of the T-clamps. They'll have this type for a drum set rack. It'll work fine. Like I said, it just puts the bar in front instead of on the same plane like over here. So you can use that sort of clamp. And then we had the stackable clamps I was showing you early, like I have up on the corner of the rack. But it's just a matter of being creative and taking, you know, what you find and using it. So a big thing, yeah, look everywhere for tubings. As far as parts, yeah, again, look for used parts. If you're building a rack that's going to stay in one place, that you're not going to take apart, put together, and travel all over, look for electronic drum racks. They use aluminum tubing, and they generally use plastic fittings. Now, I wouldn't use the plastic fittings for anything that I'm going to travel with, because I think they're more prone to breakage and they just won't stand up. I mean, I've still got clamps I've been using 20 years. You know, some of my stands, I've been using the original Gibraltar gong stuff I put together 20 years ago. But plastic fittings, I don't think are going to stand the rigors of the road. But I wouldn't hesitate to use them if I was going to have a stand here in my studio that never moved, that just kind of stayed here and held whatever instruments on it, bells or gongs or that. I wouldn't hesitate to use plastic fittings because it's just going to stay put together. It's not going to go anywhere. So I'm not going to have any wear and tear or possibilities of breakage. But you can often find electronic drum racks used without the pads. I don't know what people are doing, but I see them all the time on eBay just selling the racks. Roland drums, Yamaha drums, whatever types of electronic pads, Lisa's, you know, and it's all the same stuff. It's 1.5 inch tubing. It will be aluminum tubing. There'll be shorter tubes because electronic drum sets are much smaller. Shorter tubes and plastic fittings, but they would be fine for, like I said, something that stays in your studio. So another place to look is for used electronic drum racks. Aluminum and plastic, electronic regular drum racks are going to be steel and cast metal fittings. Electronic drum racks will be aluminum tubes and plastic fittings or some sort of composite. And she has a bonus question. I would love to know how you build those mallet trays. I remember you did a video on that a while back. Well, watch the video. I mean, I did it in photographs with narration over it because it would have been so time consuming for me to set up a video camera and record myself trying to make these stands. And I would have ended up with like 6 hours of video to edit down, and that would have been just kind of a crazy thing. It was just easier for me to, okay, I did this step, let's take a picture of it, click. Okay, I did this step, click, take another picture, and then put it together that way. So you can watch that. So I will probably put together some actual blueprints for a couple of things. For the gong stands, with the how to build, this stand behind me, the basic stand, and add extensions to it. I will put like a actual drawing of the stand, and we'll put the parts in there with their part designations and put that up on my website. And then I will draw up some blueprints for the table like I have in front of me, and the mallet table that I have over here, the tray, and how to build those, and put that on the website. So watch for that in the next probably month or so, depending on how much time I have. Okay, here we go. Final question here from Wenzel J. Thomas. I know you covered this before, as I've read the post and forgotten the details. Plus, technology changes quickly. What are the best mics to record and amplify gongs? All right. Yes, I've talked about this on multiple occasions, but I don't mind talking about it again because I get this question a lot. So let's just talk about mics real quickly. There are 4 main types of microphones, 4 different ones. We'll talk about all 4 here and then talk about what I think works best. The first type is what we would call a dynamic microphone. This is a non-powered microphone. It doesn't need any electricity to run. You just plug it in and then plug it into your mixer or your interface or your sound system, and it's good to go. This is an ATM21 from Audio-Technica. I really like their gear. And this mic is about 42 years old. I think I bought it in 1980. I bought 4 of these to use on my drum set for the snare drum and the toms. And I'm still using them. They still work. So people always ask, why should I spend so much money on gear? Whether it's a gong or it's a microphone or something. It's good gear lasts. I think I paid $120 a piece for these 42 years ago, which 42 years ago, that was a lot of money. And going back to Tasha's first question there about how do you save up to buy gongs? I mean, I remember saving up money to get these mics, and I bought 2 at a time. And I still got them. I still use them. These are dynamic microphones, and they're front addressed, so this is where the sound comes in here. This one is very much like a Shure SM57, which is kind of a industry workhorse standard microphone for drums and guitar amps and things like that. They're great little mics. You can buy a Shure SM57 for like $100. These aren't made anymore, but Audio-Technica probably has something comparable, as do a lot of other companies. So like $100. So $200, you can get 2 dynamic microphones, decent quality, and you've got a stereo pair to record with. And I have used these before I had the money to get other mics. I used these on quite a few of my recordings, and I won't tell you which ones, but I dare somebody to listen to all my recordings and tell me which ones use these or which ones use better mics, because I have one really well-known recording that was recorded with 2 of these because it's all I had, and it sounds fabulous. So it's not always, the mic. It's the whole chain of what you do with it, and then having an ear to be able to mix it down and process things. But yeah, a good dynamic mic. They don't have the frequency range necessarily. I think this one is probably like 20 hertz up to maybe 17K, maybe 18K. Dynamic mics tend to not go as high. But here's an important thing. Gongs don't generally go that high. If you put them on some sort of a scope and you look at them, gongs are mainly low and mids, and there's really nothing way up here. You can look at it, and there just aren't the high frequencies. You're not getting 20K out of a gong, not usually. So a dynamic mic can cover the whole scope of a gong. It'll sound fine. The second type of mic would be what they call a small diaphragm condenser, usually abbreviated to SDC. And sometimes called a pencil mic because it's real thin and long, kind of like a pencil. Small diaphragm condenser, again, it's what they call front address, this way. And as you can see, it's not very big around. So the diaphragm is quite small. But these work very well in capturing a lot of sounds. And these are most popular like in a stereo pair. In orchestral recordings, recording like a whole symphony orchestra, they will generally use small diaphragm condensers. They'll use high quality ones like a Neumann 184 or K183, Omni or cardioid pattern, but they will use small diaphragm condensers because they really do the job. I like to use them. That's what I have above me here, recording the sound for all my videos. A pair of SE8 small diaphragm condensers with a cardioid capsule in them. You can also get those with an Omni capsule. And just to reiterate, cardioid means it blocks the sound from the rear and kind of the side. It's almost like if you took a pear shape here. It's a little bigger, and so it's mainly sounds from the front. Omni it will pick up sounds from all around, the front, the sides, and the back. So use them for different things. Generally, a cardioid is what you want to use in recording these instruments because you don't want the sound behind you. Now, in a symphony orchestra, they will use what is called a decatree for mounting 3 microphones. It's got a crossbar, and then it's got another bar that goes out a little ways. Now, on the crossbar, they have what they call a spaced pair, and they will have 2 Omni mics, again, generally like a Neumann on there. I think it's a K183 is the Omni one. And then a third Omni in the middle that's a little bit ahead, and then they fly this rig right above the conductor so that it's basically picking up what the conductor hears, which is like sort of the sweet spot of the orchestra. So they fly this rig up there, and using 3 small diaphragm condensers to record this whole orchestra. Now they may have spot mics, like put on the oboe or the cello or something. They'll have a few spot mics that they might use when they're mixing down the album, and it's like, ooh, the oboe's just not coming through, so they will use that. But generally they just use the decatree. And often they will use that same sort of thing in a smaller chamber ensemble, or if you're recording like a string quartet or something, they will just use 2 stereo mics. Stereo mics we can position in the AB, where they're crossed over, and this mic is actually doing the sound over here, and this mic is doing the sound over here, either this way or crossed over in AB, or they could do them this way in ORTF, which is a wider type pattern. I like to do that. That's basically what I have up above me here. a little wider, which is the NOS, but that's all technical. Or you can do a spaced pair where you have them anywhere from, a couple feet to maybe 5 or 6 feet apart. So those are a couple of the main mic setups, but a lot done with small diaphragm condensers. They are really great microphones. Now, the third type of microphone is a large diaphragm condenser, also known as LDC. And the differences there, you can kind of see that circle in there, that kind of, when I get the light on there just right, now I can't get it. You can see how big it is. So the diaphragm in there is like this big, where the diaphragm in the small diaphragm condenser is, like this big. So it has a much bigger diaphragm. Does it record better than this? No. They're different and they have different purposes. So generally with these, like I said, this is a cardioid mic. If I want to make it an omni mic, a lot of these you can take the capsule off and put on a different capsule, like an omni capsule. On something like this, I have a switch on front. I can change the pattern. I can have it be a cardioid microphone, and this is front addressed, so the sound comes in this way, not this way. I can have it cardioid, I can have it omni, or I can have what they call bidirectional, figure 8, which it picks up from the front and the back, but it doesn't really pick up, the sides are a null place, so it's not picking up sound from the side, which works out well in certain situations. So I like this because it's a multi-pattern mic. It gives me a lot of, I can use it for different setups. But what I use these mainly for is close miking, especially drums. Like if this is my drum, the conga drum, I will have it, off the conga drum, 6 inches, a foot, whatever, depending on how much air I want to pick up. I generally will use a large diaphragm condenser on hand drums. I like the sound. Or if I'm micing an individual gong, like in the video I did, I think it was last week, put it up there. If I'm going to get a close mic, I like to use something like a large diaphragm condenser. You can do the same stereo configurations, XY and ORTF and all the other configurations with this. Because it has the adjustable patterns, you can do some additional things like a Blum line and mid-side recording, but that's all real technical stuff. But it's a versatile mic there. Once in a while you can kind of see that, if I get it just right, you can see that capsule in there. And it's big. But that is a large diaphragm condenser. And the fourth type of mic we got out there is a ribbon mic. I don't have any of those. They generally look sort of like this. And instead of a round diaphragm, they have a rectangular foil ribbon in there. They're a little more sensitive to shocks. You got to take care of them. You don't want to drop them or anything, because then your ribbon gets all screwed up and you're out of luck. Their frequency range is generally narrower. They don't have the real high end. But as I said, with the gongs and that, you don't really have to worry about it. If I was playing cymbals, I might not want to do ribbons on cymbals, because they really do get more higher frequencies. But the gongs don't really, I don't think it's a big deal. But ribbons are great microphones. I have done recordings with ribbons. If you go back to some of my older ones from I think it's 2007, if you listen to the brown cover ones, I did 3 albums. I can't think of what they are. Mandala, Microcosm, and the other one. I did 3 albums in one day because I'm crazy, but I had it all planned out. That's another story. But those were ribbon microphones on that, and the recordings sound great. Okay, so let's just kind of reiterate here. Dynamic microphones. Sure, SM57, $100. Sometimes on sale you can get them less. They're great mics. They're rugged. I mean, the joke is you can use it for a hammer if you don't have it, and it'll still work. Just a nice dynamic microphone is fine. It's a good place to start. Like I said, $200, maybe $50 for some cords, and then whatever interface, or you can run them into a digital recorder like my H6 or something, and you're in business recording. Small diaphragm condensers, SDCs. These are some old Cascades. These are what I started out with. I think they were about 100 a piece. And I did many recordings with these. I mean, these aren't made anymore, but they were fine. You can find a lot of good small diaphragm condensers for a couple $100 a piece. The SE8s that I have up above, that's like $500 for a stereo pair. They do make a SE7, which is, I think, like 120 a piece. Not as a little lesser microphone. Rode NT, was it NT5s? I think it is. Small diaphragm condensers, well known. So you can find a lot of good ones. Buy mics from a good brand name, though. Don't buy go on Amazon and buy some off-brand mics, because the components aren't very good. They won't last. Like I said, Audio-Technica, 42 years old, still going strong. Buy decent mics. So you can get some good small diaphragm condensers for not much more than a dynamic mic. Your choice, your call. Large diaphragm condensers, you probably want to start paying a little more. Like $250 and up. These are $500 a piece. You can easily spend, thousands of dollars on Neumann's or Schoeps or some of these other mics that you'll find in a studio on a large diaphragm condenser. So you can spend as much as you want, but something in this price range is fine. If you get mics under $1,000 for a pair, you're good to go. Especially if you're just starting. Don't go out and spend lots of money. Learn your way up. Get a couple of inexpensive mics. Learn how to get the most out of them. Learn how to record, and then also as you're learning to record more, you'll learn more about mics and buying better mics, as opposed to running out and buying stuff that you don't even know about, and just because somebody said buy this, just because I said buy this mic, okay, don't buy it. Learn about stuff, and that's what I did. Really, I started out with just some dynamic mics, then got an inexpensive set of small diaphragm condensers, and then when I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people and recorded in various studios, and then decided to go with some better mics, and I decided on the SEs because I liked them. So there you go. Hope that answers your question. I hope I didn't get a little too off track there, but yeah, if you're starting out, don't spend a lot. Just get started and get your ears going and watch. Here's a real important thing too. A big problem I have encountered in recording gongs. And I've been recording in studios since I was 18 years old. So I've been in a lot of really big name studios and little studios and studios in people's houses, all kinds of studios. I always paid attention to what was going on, what mics they had, how they set them up, what they did for recording. I like to sit in the control room and, what are they doing and why are they doing stuff. So I always paid attention. But here is a big problem in learning to record gongs. If you go on the internet and go on YouTube, or you Google and go on different websites about recording, 99.9% of that is all about how to record a rock, pop, hip-hop, country sort of album. And in playing the gongs, we don't want anything to do with any of those techniques, really, because it's all designed to create an artificial sound. Just to give you an example, if you were to be in a recording studio right next to the drummer as he's playing, and you're listening to the drums there, and then you get the finished album and you listen to the drums, they sound absolutely nothing like the drums in the studio sounded like. This is probably in almost 100% of any pop rock albums out there, fusion albums, things like that, because the drums are so highly processed. They go through all kinds of filters and EQs and compressors and effects. Often the drums are replaced with samples or enhanced with samples. So the acoustic drum sound you hear in a studio is not what ends up on a recording. Jazz is a whole other thing. Like if you go back over the famous jazz producer Rudy Van Gelder, who had this studio and recorded all the greats. Basically, he stuck mics up there and he recorded what it sounded like in the room. And it was like nothing done to it, hardly at all. So if you stood next to Max Roach in the studio playing, and then you listen to the recording of Max Roach, it would sound just like it sounded when you were standing right next to him in the studio, because there was very little, if any, processing done. It was just capturing the sound. So what you want to look for, and it's very hard to find, very, 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 very hard to find, is information on recording classical music. There are some good videos out there and some good websites about recording classical music. Acoustic music of any type, like folk music, like acoustic guitar, classical guitar, even like acoustic country music, where it's just like a banjo, a guitar, and a fiddle. Acoustic music, how to record acoustic instruments. How to record like solo instruments, like a solo violin or viola, a solo cello, a solo trumpet, trombone, anything like that. Information on recording acoustic instruments in an acoustic environment and capturing the actual sound. Not that, okay, now we're going to take this and we're going to process the hell out of it and you won't even recognize it. No. So you have to look for that sort of stuff. It's hard to find, but it's out there. I did my homework and I found a few really good things on recording orchestras and recording, how to mic positions and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I applied that to the gongs, because the gong is no different than a viola or a cello or something like that. It really isn't, because what we want to record is the air. So that's why I have my mics here. They're actually right straight up right here. They're not that close. They're 4 feet in front of these gongs here. 4 feet. And so that means they're kind of like 4 feet from the sides too. I want to capture the sound of the air. I want that live sound. So, that's a big part of what I believe in recording. Or else I'll put, some mics like right out here in front or above in front. I want to capture the air sound. I don't want to do a close mic unless I'm doing something specific. So that's just my ideas. Look for classical and acoustic music recording ideas. And just, Google that. Recording classical music. Recording acoustic guitar. Recording folk instruments, and you'll find some weird stuff. You might find how to record a recorder, or an oboe or something. But you can use that information because we're recording acoustically. Okay, so that's for that part. I think I kind of went overboard on that, didn't I? That's okay. So have a good time. We will see you next time. Probably get to Donald's questions here about talking about it. Different approaches to entry points in a sound meditation and how to use like minimum instruments, 1 gong and 2 or so bowls and bells. Maybe we'll do that for next week. Thanks a lot.